when the Henry Graves came back to the market in 2014, I was like, couldn't believe that I was going to have the opportunity to handle such an iconic watch from our past sale, the Time Museum sale in 1999, and it was still the record for the most complicated watch at auction, and then to have it arrive in our office and to have it in hand, it was a dream.
Fantastic watch.
Yeah, and then for it to go up in auction and achieve another world record, it was unbelievable. And then luckily enough, we've recently achieved another record with the English pocket watch with the George Daniels Space Traveller. They're both exceptional watches in their own right. George's handcraftsman watches are just unbelievable, the detail, and such a beautiful watch to look at, so balanced, there's so much symmetry in the movement and the dial.
It's crazy when you look at the movement of the Space Traveller, and it's so classically George in the way that it looks basically unfinished. There's no fancifulness, there's no ornate finishing, but it is so absolutely absurdly complicated. When you know, I remember when I looked at the front, I was almost in contrast, more excited to see the movement than to see the front side. The front side was fantastic and beautiful, but the movement was just mind-bogglingly complicated. Really fantastic watch.
And it was all in his head as well. That was the amazing thing. It's like he just understood it. He just knew where everything was going to go and how it was all going to be placed. And you know, the drawings are something that he wasn't particularly fond of.
I often wonder if that isolation on the Isle of Man for 2 or 3 decades basically allowed him to create that sort of genius, that moment of genius where he was so separated from everything going on elsewhere. He could just focus on being innovative and coming up with something new without caring whether other people were judging him, only to very briefly then come back to reality with the coaxial and pitching it to the world. But amazing
I think
watch.
he probably enjoyed making the Space Traveller for himself more, because that was purely for his own pleasure, and that he held on to that had it in his own collection.
My provenance probably would be Horatio Nelson's watch, rather, that he wore on the Victory as he died. But it was just a movement. The case had completely disappeared, and it was set in a carriage clock case. But that was one of those things that you're really touching a piece of history, something that has changed and formed what we understand around us today. So that was definitely my moment of history and provenance.
Recently we had a gentleman come and see us who used to drive for Bernard White's Formula One team in the 60s. And Bernard White owned the racing team, and I think they came 4th in the Monaco Grand Prix, and I think it was 64 or 66. Anyway, they did the film about it, Monaco. He was one of the racing drivers in the team, and he got it as a gift from Mr. White, and we sat down with him for about half an hour, and he just suddenly took out this incredible packet of black and white photos and photocopies of extracts from books and handwritten notes, and like signed, celebrity photos from the 60s. And he said, yeah, this is what I did. I was racing this, and I raced that, and I had this Ferrari, and then I did this Aston Martin, and then we traveled around the world, and it was just this moment where you thought, well, and he knew Johan Rindt, and he knew Mr. Andretti, and, you just thought, wow, there was this sort of capsule of time when people in a certain space doing certain things in a very different way to today were literally mixing with all the great names that have now gone down in history as, the sobriquets or the nicknames for specific watches. And it's sort of weird, certainly at my age, to suddenly have a connect between what has become almost a professional reference and the practical reality, someone who actually lived all these things and, was in the pit sweating and had, Jack Coy running around trading watches and, anyway, no other astonishing stories of provenance on the vintage side, but moments like that certainly pack their punch.